This week, Anneli Furmark, a Swedish illustrator and comics artist who Koom caught up with at this year's in-person Toronto Comic Arts Festival. She talks about her graphic novel, Walk Me to the Corner, about two middle-aged women who are married to men but become attracted to each other. But Furmark says it's not an LGBT book. Stay tuned to hear more on that. First, if you appreciate the work we do on deconstructing comics and our other podcasts, we'd love it if you'd support the show at patreon.com/deconcomics for as little as $2 a month. Check out our goals and rewards and pledge your support now at patreon.com/deconcomics. This is Tim, and this is Deconstructing Comics.
Hi, it's Koom for Deconstructing Comics podcast at the TCAF 2022, first TCAF live show in a couple of years now. And I'm here with Anneli Furmark. I don't know if I pronounced your name wrong, so you can tell us.
It's Anneli Furmark.
Anneli Furmark.
Anneli, it's like, it's more of a in the beginning. Anneli.
I think the Swedish pronunciation is so beautiful. I don't know. I just, it is a kind of like a lull and then an emphasis at the end.
I've heard the expression ABBA accent, so, like the accent of the female singers in ABBA.
Yeah, I don't know if I associate them so much as, of course, as you know, I love Bergman. So yeah. I met Lee Woolman once when she was here. She's not Swedish,
no,
of
she's
course.
Norwegian.
But we have this festival TIFF, right?
Yes.
Big festival. So they were putting on, not during the main festival, but they were putting on like most of Bergman's films for his centenary of his birth or something like that.
Oh, that's great.
And so I went to go see, something like 30 films in 3 weeks.
Yes.
And so she was there presenting, one or two of them. And so I got there early and I was sitting up at the front. And then the presenter came on and then they brought her out and they had her sitting in the front row.
Yeah.
And she wanted some water, and the person who was there volunteering for TIFF or working for TIFF just said, hold on, they'll get you up there. But so I went out and I got a cup of water and I brought it back. But by that time they got her a bottle of water. But she was so appreciative afterwards that she signed this massive poster I have for, in English it's called The Passion of Anna. I don't know what the Swedish title is.
Passion of Anna, what could it be? Could it be The Silence?
It's not The Silence, it's after that. It's the one it's part of sort of a series that he made. So The Passion of Anna was one, Shame is another. They're all with Lev and Sidow. Anyway, it's around the very early 70s. But anyway, she plays a character called Anna in it.
Okay.
And her hand was shaking as she wrote something because, she's older now. But she was so appreciative and it moved me so much that she took the time to write a few sentences and so that was my one connection to Sweden. I always wanted to go to Gotland and then go to the festival, but to be honest with you, I don't know if I would have been. I don't know if I'd get the same thing out of him. There's a filmmaker whose film I reviewed recently. Sorry about the digression, but there's a filmmaker, and I can't remember her name, but she's a female filmmaker, and she made a film called Bergman Island.
I heard about it. I haven't seen it. No.
And I found it fascinating because it's all about trying to grapple with this thing about his legacy, which is kind of a sexist legacy in many ways.
It is.
Yeah, and at the same time, being affected by his filmmaking, and then also going to Sweden. And this is one great moment in the film where a character who's a fictional character in the woman's film, so it's 2 layers removed, is talking about coming to Bergman Island, and this guy who's at a wedding or something just says, "Fuck Bergman." my parents lived near him, and I'd run into him in the store when he was alive, and he was just this awful, miserable man.
Maybe he was both. I don't have a very strong relation to Bergman, and I've never been to that island. Mm-hmm. Yes, actually, I was there once, but that was like when I was 20 or something, and he was still alive.
Sure.
But I've never seen.
Did you go there for the purpose of?
No, I went there to visit a friend.
Okay. We should talk about you. How did you become interested in comics and find your path?
Actually, I was very interested in comics as a child. I thought it was the best way to express things, so that's what I did. I wrote and I draw a lot.
Where in Sweden were you?
In the north of Sweden. And I read like all comics I could get, because with no.
What could you get?
I could get Lucky Luke, Tintin, Moomin, the Moomin comics.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, they were very
comics,
very important to me.
Mm.
Swedish comics called Bamse.
Were there a lot of comics in Sweden?
Yeah, you could have a lot of comics. You could buy comics in every store and every and also.
You mean bookstores?
Books? No, I mean like everywhere you could buy comic paper, like magazines. But at that time, but now, and also I think my father was quite interested in comics, so he gave me a lot of comics. Me and my brother, we were really into some comics also.
Did you at that time think, I'm going to do adult stories in comics form?
Never. But I think I was absorbed by the storytelling, by the way of expressing things then, because I read like Tintin over and over. I knew them by heart, and also the moving characters. I knew every page of them, and also I studied the drawings, because I really liked to draw, and I did that from early age. It's like I felt that drawing was something for me. So, and then when in my 20s I started in art school or in art college, and it was like comics wasn't the thing when I was studying art.
We hear that a lot here too.
Yes.
Even yesterday somebody told me that he's both an artist and a researcher, and once he got his tenure he thought, no, I can do whatever I want.
Yes,
but now there's pushback.
Yeah, that happened to me too. So when I finished,
are you a teacher?
I'm teaching some occasionally. I'm not a teacher full time, but I teach also. But when I finished my art studies, my MFA, it was like the day after I started to do comics.
What did you do your MFA on?
On fine art. And like paintings mostly, and some. I tried to do some other more contemporary stuff. I don't think they were very good.
Well, your comics are very painterly. Were you working in watercolor back then?
No, I was painting mostly in acrylic.
Okay.
Some oil painting before, but I would never say never, but I don't think I would paint in oil again, because I like the feeling of to not have the control in a way that the water brings to the paper. So I think watercolor and ink and made perhaps gouache and things, but soluted with water is what I like.
I always like watercolors. There's a kind of emotional tone you can find as you're playing with it.
Yes. Yeah. It suits me.
So you said the day after you finished your MFA, you were doing comics.
Yes.
What kind of comics were you doing?
I was suddenly I realized that I had some stories from my youth that was quite interesting. And you read the Red Winter.
I read Red
I think
Winter.
the first longer, I made some panels like, just one frame with some funny thing on for a while. But then I had this need to make a longer story, so I made like a short story, a novella about some years in my youth when I was together with a very convinced communist boy.
Well, that's very similar to Red Winter in some ways.
Yeah, it started kind of there.
So would you say then that Red Winter, which once again, I'll be honest, is the only work of yours I've read, and that was reviewed a little while ago, so my memory is not as good as it used to be.
It's okay.
But things stick with me, and I was wondering, so in your book Red Winter, you made the woman, who I think the book is more from her point of view, even though the shift is there to other characters. She's the main character. You made the woman older than the man, but in your own experience, biographically, that wasn't the case.
No, it wasn't. No.
Yeah.
It's Red Winter is not like autobiographical. It's a very fictional story. But I interviewed friends of mine who were more into these groups than I was, so I had kind of a research for the political stuff, and I also focused quite a lot on the children in the book, if you remember, and they are a little bit more autobiographical than the grown-up stories in the book.
And so it was the 70s when you came out of your MFA and...
No. I'm 60 now, but I was a very late student, so I finished my MFA in 97.
Oh, okay. Oh, interesting, because I thought maybe that's why you set Red Winter in the 70s.
Yeah, but the main character in Red Winter, she's about... It is about 1976, 77 something, and then I was 14 years old. So
I see. Okay. Fredrik told me yesterday that in Sweden you get all the awards and all the funding. So has this always been the case? Were you recognized from the beginning?
No, actually in comics I was. With the paintings and with the fine art, no, not very much. But it was like I found something when I started with comics, and it was the comic scene in Sweden is not very big, so I got some intention. I also got some very good help from some other comic people. It's like, I know a publisher you can talk to, and I know what you can do. You can come to this place, and so I was really welcomed into the scene from the beginning, which was great, because the comic scene I found very much like more friendly and more open-hearted than the fine art scene
and the film scene.
Yeah,
which is what I found. That's why I like comics.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, so I was like, I'm going to do comics. It was really like an eye opener, and also I found I had because I always wanted to write, and when I tried to write without the drawings, I didn't like the writing. It was stiff, and I was embarrassed for it in a way. But when I combined the writing with the drawings, it was something else. Then I suddenly could stand my own writing, and I could see that I had stories.
Do you do both at the same time? Do you do some kind of thumbnails where you draw some rough sketches and write at the same time?
I do. I always work at the same time. So I think it comes very okay. I should say maybe the images are maybe the first. That like first I have the images, or kind of an atmosphere or a setting, often a landscape. Like I know where it's going to be set, or where I'm going to put the people, and then the characters, and then the dialogue comes when I have the characters in a way, and also the story develops during my work. I don't have a script which I follow. So
you sort of find it from the general to the specific by having an idea and working on both the drawing and the writing together. Yeah,
I have some idea about the beginning, where I start, and then I know kind of small scenes in the book, and then I have some vague idea about how it will end. But when I start to draw this thing that I know about, like a scene or a dialogue, then the rest of the story will hopefully like show itself or develop itself, or like what do you call it when you take off the veil or something?
Reveal it.
Reveal it, yeah. Reveal.
Is Drone and Quarterly your main publisher?
It's in Sweden. It's Galago, and I also published, I have I think it's 6 books now in French by a publisher called Saila, and I have 2 on Drawn and Quarterly, Red Winter and this Walk Me to the Corner.
So do you just directly deal with Galago and then they license the English version out to D&Q?
Yeah, now they do.
Okay.
I have an agent. I work together with them, who works together with an agent. So.
But I'm guessing all of your comics have been done in Swedish.
Yes.
You've never directly done them in English or French.
I think I'm not French for sure, but I don't think I would be able to write my own book in English. I've written some short stories directly in English, but for a novel, no, I don't trust my English.
When you say short stories, you mean short comic stories?
Yeah, short comic stories, yes.
Do you ever look at them translated into English and compare and say, this doesn't feel the same, or this feels different in terms of the tone or something?
You know, I must say the English, the Red Winter, and this one, Walk Me to the Corner, they feel I'm totally safe with the content. It's like Hanna, who made the translation, she knows Swedish from heart, but also she has a very good sense of English. So I think I haven't found, I'm not that good in English, so I can see if the tone is exact, but to me it looks like it is exact. But for the French, I can't really decide because my French is poorly, but I think they keep the tone. Maybe it's a little bit more words about it in the French versions because my language is a bit direct, a little bit northern Swedish, I think, a little bit blunt.
Are you trying to say harsh?
Harsh.
Yeah.
That's the word. Blunt is another thing. It's when
they're both synonyms for each other.
Yeah, a little bit.
But a harsh,
not very smooth.
Harsh is a judgment too.
Okay, yeah.
Well, so is blunt to some degrees, but yeah, harsh sounds like if I speak harshly to you, it means I'm not as sensitive to your feelings.
No, that's not. That
that's
is
not
the
what
wrong
you mean.
word. No,
yeah.
I mean it's not so flowery.
I see what you mean. Yeah, spare.
Yeah.
You mean spare.
Yeah, and I think this is very well translated.
I really would like to talk about Walk Me to the Corner in a few minutes, but let me ask you, how do you generally come at a process of deciding what you're going to write about or how to approach your characters or stories? Because it sounds like the plot reveals itself in time.
Yes.
So you're working with characters and situations first,
yes,
right?
I do. And sometimes I have to redraw 20 pages.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Because I realized that one of the characters are wrong, or it's not the way I wanted it. So, but then on the other hand, then I know because I have to try it on paper. So if it's wrong, then sometimes it takes 20 pages, but then the next 20 pages will be easy to draw because I know.
So how do you decide upon a situation and who your characters are going to be when you begin a project?
Sometimes it's kind of a mystery to me, actually. It happened once in a while that I had a character that I knew a person that I wanted to make some kind of portrait. And when I started the work, this portrait thing disappeared quite quickly, and I left. I just stopped. It was like this person was doing something else that this other one would never do. So then I think the character was more revealing itself again. But I think I do some kind of mix. I mix some people together that have been important for me in different ways, and I make them into something else. It's never strict autobiographic, but it has some autobiographic parts in it,
It sounds like you kind of like take things from life that you found interesting or you want to reflect on, and then you start working with it maybe, and then it changes.
It does.
And then,
And then I also have to follow the change, because it's like I can't say to myself, no, this was not what happened. I prefer to say, well, it didn't happen, but it happens in the book. Because the book gets its own logic, and so
of course.
So it starts often with people I know, people I've seen, people I've had relationships with, and then I mix them into something else.
Do you always work with paint?
Yes. No. Now I do. I started with black and white. My first two. Yeah. My first two was on
with like a brush or
with
a pen and ink, or
this little
the nib.
Yeah, the nib.
Yeah,
which I liked. And sometimes I think I could do it again. I've done 3 or 4 books in black and white. So, but mostly it's color, because color is.
So you didn't color them after you did them in pen and ink?
No.
And with these, there's no inking over?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, it's like fine liners and pens and brush pens and also fluid ink and crayons, and it's like everything.
You're just using everything.
Yeah.
So you'll first do it in color, do your painting, and then you'll take your markers or whatever you like to do the outlines.
Yes, I do. I think my first choice in this one was the color, and then I choose the color from the chapter, from the scene. So this is like a yellow chapter, or yellow green, because it's summer, and it's getting more gray.
I see.
Yeah. So I think my first choice is the color, and then I make this with the brush and water, a lot of water often, and then we clean the speech bubbles afterwards.
Yeah.
Which is good.
Do you compose a page? Do you say, well, page 120 is going to have 6 panels in it?
No, I don't.
So you just have a situation and you just go panel by panel?
Yeah.
Literally, you'll do one panel and then you'll say, let me do another panel, and we'll see if it's smaller or bigger.
It's like, well, I have a big one. Okay, next one. Okay, I take two ones on this. Well, now it's time because now they have to talk a lot, so then I do 6. And then, okay.
But it's literally panel by panel. You wouldn't even say they're going to talk a lot on page 101, so let me in my mind think of it as 6 panels. That's very interesting.
It's very fluid. It's like very from day to day, or from panel to panel.
Well, you were telling me before the interview about this book that it's kind of like it's coming from a sketchbook, so that kind of fits for this one. So let's talk about it. What's it about, and how did you decide upon the situation for this one? And this is, once again, Walk Me to the Corner in English. I'm not sure what the Swedish title.
Gå med mig till hörnet. But it is from a Leonard Cohen song. It's not the title of the song, but it's part of the song.
I saw him in concert.
Oh, you did? I've never done that.
About 10 years ago, and one of my biggest regrets, I saw him one other time at a street performance, but one of my biggest regrets is that I didn't go to another concert because it was so moving. Like he just put so much into it, and that's also why he died, because of the injuries sustained from touring, which he had to do because his manager had stolen them. Yeah. But he's one of my most favorite musicians with Dylan and others. And
I told someone, I don't know, in another interview, I think it was like, what's the words of Leonard Cohen means to me. And because there are some quotes in the book from Leonard Cohen and from Johnny Mitchell. But I said it's like, well, this song I heard it in my 20s the first time, and then it had one meaning, and then it's kind of songs that follows you during life. It gets other meanings, and they change, but they are still the same, like great art in a way. It's like some of the things that I listened to when I was 20 is like, oh, but these are not. They will always. I think I will always listen to them. Occasionally,
Me too.
Yeah.
Me too.
So it's this like, I'm not looking for another, as I wander in my time, walk me to the corner. Our steps will always rhyme. So it's in Swedish it is walk me to the corner, but in Swedish. So I'm happy to have the original title here in English again. I think it's,
English to Swedish and back to English.
Yes. Well.
Like a lot of musicians, he painted too. Did you ever see any of his paintings?
I've seen some drawings in some books and so, yeah.
I think there was one I could have bought out of an auction or something, but I just couldn't afford it. No. It wasn't unreasonable. It was just for me at my level.
Coming up, Furmark on her book Walk Me to the Corner and on the watercolor and layout techniques she chose for this book. But first, a reminder to join us for 20th Century TV and music trivia quiz videos and more on our Patreon page. Every month, patrons donating $4 a month or more also get a full-length podcast episode reviewing an issue of The Amazing Spider-Man by Lee and Ditko. And the transition to John Romita Sr. is coming up fast. Check out our goals and rewards at patreon.com/deconcomics. If you'd rather give a one-time donation, you can do so via PayPal by sending it to mail@deconstructingcomics.com. We appreciate your support.
Welcome to the Superman Fan Podcast. My name is Billy Hogan, and I will be your host. Before we begin our journey through the time barrier, please ensure that your red indestructible capes are securely fastened around your necks so that we may all travel safely into the past to explore the Silver Age adventures of the Man of Steel in the pages of Action Comics, Superman, Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen, Superman's girlfriend Lois Lane, and World's Finest Comics. After we return from our journey, I encourage you to go to the website, thesupermanfanpodcast.blogspot.com. I look forward to have you join me each week to explore the Silver Age adventures of the Man of Steel.
But anyway, so tell me about your book and the situation.
Well, Walk Me to the Corner, it's about a frustrating and sad love story, or actually it's about two love stories. But it's not sad in the end. It's kind of open-ended, open-ending. But it is about a woman who is in her 50s, in her in her 50s, and she's very happily married. She thinks, or she says, with her husband Henrik, who is a good person, and they have 2 grown-up children that doesn't live at their place anymore. And then I think. Elisa, this is the Elisa. She thinks that her life is totally set, and then she meets Dagmar at a party, and they start to text each other, and.
But she's not the one who's married. That's another character.
They are both married.
They're both
Elisa and also Dagmar, who she meets. They are both married, but not with each other. So, and then everything changes. In the beginning, it's like more of a kind of fun little thing with these text messages and these songs they send to each other, and sometimes phone calls. But then they decide to meet. They don't live in the same city, but they decide to meet, and then it takes another direction.
Well, is it like Red Winter, where once people find out, it creates a lot of trouble for them?
No, it's not. It's like both Elisa and Dagmar, who is the other woman, they immediately tell their spouses that this has happened, and I don't know what will happen now, but no one wants to divorce their spouse. No one of them, but they still want to be together, which is perhaps working for some people, but for Elisa especially, it's not working. So, and also her husband has other plans. In the beginning,
this is Elisa, right, with the dark hair.
That's Elisa, yeah. Well, I don't know how much to say about the story.
Say as much as you'd like. I think what we want to do is we want to get information about you out to other people who normally would not know about your books.
No, yeah.
Right, so.
Well, it's a love story about between two women in their 50s with already lives that was already set, and they were not unhappy in those situations, or in the lives. They had good lives, but then they meet and things develop in a way they couldn't really control.
Are you just interested in looking at that situation? What happens when you can't really foresee or control this kind of situation? Or do you think about these characters and say their gender or their sexuality is repressed and then it naturally must come out? Or
that's very good question, because I always, when I've been talking about this book, I said it's not like a LGBT book. It's not, which makes some people angry. It's not a book about suddenly see your true self. It's a book about the mess that happens when you meet someone else, a new person that you can't resist. And it's not really important that this person has the same gender or the same sex as you. It's not the question in this book, and they never even talk about it. I think it's one line when they quote a song and there's the word gay in it, but otherwise it's not.
Even
like
their
an
husbands
issue.
Don't question it?
No, but the other person is married to a woman.
Oh.
No, not actually, not in the book. No, this Henrik, the character Henrik, he's of course confused and sad and don't know what will happen with his life or with their life. But the thing with there is a woman is not an issue for him either.
There is a commonality between this and Red Winter, and the commonality is the infidelity.
Yes.
And of course, that's very much a part of Bergman's films.
It is.
And it's very much a part of films, I think, of a certain kind of era, certain kind of art film. Like if you look at Woody Allen's films, for example, he's doing a North American version of that.
Yes, but he was also very much into Bergman.
Into Bergman, very much so, to the point that he was copying him. Right. But I was just wondering, is that kind of something that's a preoccupation for you? How do people deal with breaking those traditional vows that they make when they get married?
I think I must say I didn't think it would be, but I guess it is. The book starts with 3 lines that Elisa had always thought that all you had to do was pull yourself together. So I think this kind of sets the tone that I think it's interesting if you consider yourself being, I'm this kind of person, and then something happens, and then you can be young or you can be old, but at some point you realize I'm not that kind of person anymore, or things have changed in my life, and I think it's interesting and it's scary, of course, but I wanted to make a book about this change that wasn't really expected, and also that you can't really control everything in your life, I think.
Yeah, I mean, we create, if you imagine life like a river or like a raging river that you have to cross. not cross, but like journey down. We create a kind of a boat for ourselves by having this idea of who we are.
Yes, yes.
And then what often happens in life periodically is that idea gets challenged in a big way.
Yes.
Like maybe you think you have virtues or principles, and then you do something which compromises those principles,
exactly.
or when you're tested, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then you have to kind of either enlarge in that idea of who you are, or you have to like reckon with the fact that you lied to yourself, and you have to lie to yourself.
Yeah, but what I didn't want was to make a book where a woman in her 50s realized that her true self is homosexual, because her true self was not was to be together with her husband for like 25 years, and then something happens, and then and I think also new research is like people are not set, even not in their sexuality. You can be straight when you grow up, and you can have another sexuality later in life or back again. It's like
that happened to a couple I knew when I was younger. There was a couple that I was friends with who were older than me, and I used to look after their dogs, and they were very kind of encouraging because I was starting out as a writer and stuff. And the woman was working with somebody who she developed a relationship with, and they didn't plan it. It happened, and then she announced it to her husband, and then she moved in with the woman. And so I went over one day, and he said, we have to tell you this, we're separating, and it's like a big thing. And I was just there with him and the dogs, and I said to him, aren't you like really angry? Aren't you really upset? And he just said, no. I think it took him like a long time to deal with it. He eventually moved on. He found somebody else, and he's still with that person. But just at the time, it was so interesting. And now that I can look back, I can kind of say to myself, with his wife, like I could see that the signals were there in our conversations. She would sometimes bring up gender in interesting ways, and this was a long time ago, way before the modern conversation about these kinds of things. But I don't think that's a satisfying answer, that say she was a repressed gay person or something like that. And she would always say to me, even long before this, she would say, I'm always interested in the person. I'm not interested in, one kind of attraction or whatever. And we kind of wrap our brains into like knots trying to figure out, because once again, I think it's that idea of identity and who we are, and you want a secure understanding of who you are, but sometimes it's very difficult to have that.
Yeah, and it's like if you break borders, you don't want new borders. If you're revealing something, or you're developing yourself or exploring something, and then you find there is a new border, because then you have to be like, well, now you're in this group, and then you have to say these things because that was what we are expecting from you. So I don't want that.
Well, I think nowadays there's a real kind of commonality to people saying they're in relationships, but they're in polyamorous kind of thing, and that's their way of saying I have a primary partner, but now I, whatever. And I don't understand it. I'm too whatever for it.
I think I'm too.
Yeah.
For me, it's difficult, and for the characters in the books, it's not an option. Even if it could be an option at the moment, they even try the idea, but for the main character, she realizes it's not for her. This is the one.
Would you say that this is sort of what the book is really about? It's about them wrestling with how to deal with this situation and how to kind of come to terms with who they are as a result of it?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I get a little bit irritated when I read some reviews that it is like a coming out book, because it's not a coming out book. It's not. I'm sorry, the LGBT community, but it is. In a way, it is, because of course, I understand.
So they didn't put you on the queer comics panel today?
Yeah,
I'm kidding.
They didn't. They didn't.
I'm kidding.
but it could have.
There is one today.
Yeah, but there is a. Yeah, no, I've seen it. There is a queer. In my hometown, in the library, there is a
queer section.
Queer section, and there it is. So I'm fine with that, but it's no problem. And I also understand, of course, that there is a lot of issues that we really have to fight for in the LGBT community that I also want to fight for, but this is not like a pamphlet book.
Yeah, that's not your intention.
No.
Did you come to a kind of conclusion in the book about that question of identity and dealing with the situation, or do you leave it more open-ended?
I leave it open-ended, but this is like 2 years ago now, so
yeah.
Personally, I
2 years ago that it came out in Swedish?
Yes, no, 1.5. Yeah, October 2.
Was it
2020.
COVID that stopped it
Yes.
from being translated and released in here?
I don't know. I haven't been talking so much about this book because of COVID. But now it's released in French and German, and I am here now, and I will also go to Germany and talk about it. And I've been so now it's like it's the delay for like the promotion of this book has been delayed.
Interesting. Like the James Bond film, they delayed it for 2 years.
A little bit like the James Bond film. Yes.
I get the feeling that your books, even though once again I've only read one of them, they do seem to deal with like people and relationships and sort of like these more intimate problems. Like, do you ever do anything that's radically different in terms of approach to?
No, I've been some years ago, during some years I was doing like short panels for a local newspaper that were more direct. What happened in the contemporary things, and some quite humorous, I think. But then I had to do one every third week, and I thought it was really stressing because I had to come up with something that was kind of punchy in a way, and that was feministic and or politic in a way. But so I'm happy I stopped with it.
Okay.
I don't do that so much more, but I do illustrations for other
magazines and things.
Yes, and also now for another writer. We have worked together with a book. She's writing, and I'm doing the illustrations.
That sounds fantastic.
Yeah.
Forgive me for asking, but do you also have a family, or is this pretty much your main?
Yes, I live by myself, but I have a spouse, but we don't live together. And I have 2 grown-up children, and one of them is living in my hometown, and the other one's living in Stockholm. So
I see. And the spouse that you don't live with, which I find really interesting, is that like a long-term spouse, the parent of your children? Or?
No, it's not.
So it's a choice kind of later on in life, and do you think maybe some of those choices from like the middle of your life have influenced what happens in the books in terms
Absolutely.
of without being biographical, but the same kinds of conundrums and
I like to think also to make it easier to talk about the book. I like to think that some of these things are totally made up, and some of these things are not in the book. They are not made up, but I'm really mysterious about what is made up and what is not made.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, do the people in your life, like your children or partners or friends, do they ever kind of take a look at your work and say, well, this is really me, or this is your problem with me, and you just...
I always fear that. So for this book, I had 2 close persons, to read it before I sent the script to the publisher. I said you have to read.
When
it.
you say script, I thought you didn't write a script. I thought you were just...
I mean
the finished book.
The finished book.
Oh yeah.
Or but before it was published. So 2 persons read it, and they said okay, and then I could publish it.
I see.
But it still was...
when you mean the 2 people who you thought were reflected in the book, and you were worried that they would be upset?
Yeah,
I see.
Because I didn't want to upset them.
That was very nice of you. Some people wouldn't.
sometimes they are upset anyway, but then at least I know that they have seen it before.
So then I have to ask, is it the two people that your two main characters, Elisa and Dagmar, are based on?
It is... Well, it's a
Sorry,
man
not
and a
based
woman.
on. I shouldn't have used those words.
No, it's a man and a woman.
Okay.
Anyway.
Okay, fair enough. Is there anything I haven't covered that you want to talk about?
I don't know. Maybe the technique, the water.
Yes, please. Let's talk about the technique more. Watercolors. And I did mention before the interview to you that you're not using panel borders, which I thought was interesting.
In this book, no.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I do.
Yes.
Yeah. But I had this sketchbook idea. No, we talked about it actually. But it's. I like to work with pens and pencils. I think it's something with that it takes time. That I have to be a little bit careful with. I like it because then it's like when I'm working on a page, I'm in my mind thinking about the next page. So I like the more crafting part of the work as well, because if I only work like very direct and sketchy, then I think I would get lost. I would lose some reflections, I think. So.
Yeah, I think it's more common for the Europeans.
Yeah.
Like if I look at French bande dessinée, that's kind of in this vein. It's like that. We have some North American ones that say may use color, but I get the feeling that for the North Americans, they do inherit more of a sense of that formal comics kind of page layout, borders, defined like pictures in relation to each other kind of thing. And I don't know why. Maybe because the kinds of comics we have in our history tend to fall in either, adventure or comic strip, which tend to be more very formalized kind of comics. But I don't know. I could be wrong in that generalization. I feel like the Europeans will do something more like that.
Yeah, and I think that some people like in Japan, for example, they can't really. I don't think they like this at all because it's so sketchy and
it might be
open,
and also the emotions may not translate.
Yes,
culturally.
I think so. I think so.
Yeah.
Because they're like no, and also but also there's like a term in even in northern comics that it's like ugly drawing, So it's people who draw very realistic or something, they can have this
international following.
Yeah, but they can have this like, oh, but this is you're an ugly drawer. It's like, but it's not a.
You get that in Sweden?
Sometimes, yeah.
Interesting, because I would think that Moomin or none of those are. I think of and so maybe that's another thing that's very North American too. Is just very much that classical sense of anatomy and style that is very influential. But I would think that you wouldn't have that there so much.
Yeah, we do some. There are some, but I'm not really. I don't bother actually.
In Swedish comics, they have that kind of style?
They have a lot of different styles, but it is a lot of female Swedish comics artists that are really good. That are really, they have their very own appearance, or like very own way of drawing and telling stories. And so I think there are a lot of good ones.
Yeah.
Also, of course, not only female, but there are actually. Yeah, the comic business in Sweden, I should say, is like 50-50 or even more women than men now.
Tell us a bit more what it's like to be interested in comics in Sweden. Are there festivals?
Yeah,
are there lots of people who read like in France and Japan who just...
No, not like that.
What's it like in Sweden if you like comics?
Well, no, I've been in the comic communities for so long time, so no, I don't know anymore. But I have the feeling that it's much more accepted as an art form and also as a literary form, because like in the libraries there are, you know, comic sections.
But not just in Stockholm, like everywhere.
No, everywhere. Yeah, and that wasn't the case like 20 years ago when I started. Then I always had to explain myself. So I'm a comic artist. Oh, what's your comic strip? Is it humorous? Can I show you something? Or can you show me something? Do I know your figure, your character? And I said, no. Well, I do like books, but longer. But I have to explain myself all the time. And now it's not happening anymore. I don't have to explain that I write comic books. It's more of an accepted art form.
Sure.
Sometimes I get this again. It's like. And like a review can still start with the words, I never read comics, which is kind of strange, I think.
Because it lands with a reviewer that normally reviews novels and things like that.
Yes, and also if I meet people in my age or older, they can come to me and say, you know, I never liked comics, but I liked your books, which is supposed to be a nice thing to say, but I get annoyed because I think they have read comics, but they didn't consider it as reading. You know, if they read comics when they were children, it wasn't reading, it wasn't art, you know, so, or it wasn't literature, so, well.
Well done, and I guess that's a good place to stop.
Yes, it is.
Walk Me to the Corner is published in the U.S. by Drawn and Quarterly. Her site is AnneliFurmark.com. It's linked in the show notes. You can help the Deconstructing Comics family of podcasts by joining us on Patreon at patreon.com/deconcomics. And go to deconstructingcomics.com to connect to us on Twitter, Facebook, or YouTube, to shop on Amazon to support the show, and to find links to subscribe to the podcast. Our theme is by J.B. Anderton. If you're looking for some constructive feedback on your comic, send it to us and we'll critique it on our spin-off podcast, Critiquing Comics. Send it to mail@deconstructingcomics.com. We'll read it and record our critique. Later this week, Jason and I discuss the nautical horror anthology, A Lungful of Brine. Then next week, another of our MCU movie reviews previously only available on Patreon. Mulele and I discuss the movie Ant-Man. Till then, this is Tim, and thanks for listening to Deconstructing Comics.